when we talk about, and this kind of related to the project subject as well, but when we talk about doing a project, there's often a lot of discussion about, especially if you're trying to talk about the project in a resume, you're going to talk about what the business impact was, what you hoped to achieve with the project. In that regard, I had a specific question because my interest is specifically in healthcare. And from a previous job, I have experience in healthcare. And I wanted to leverage that experience and that knowledge and look for a project in the same domain. So I did find a data set, I think a year ago, and then I stopped working on it. Then I finished it recently. And I found another data set, kind of unrelated, but in the same field. So now I have two projects in that same field that are completed, and that mainly came from my interest in the field and kind of to expand on my domain knowledge and kind of use that and see how I can apply machine learning to that. How do you go about addressing the business impact when it's not a business-driven project to begin with? The purpose of the project is more oriented towards whether you can apply machine learning in diagnostics, for example. So how do you talk about something like that in a resume where everything revolves around I drove X business, I drove like X business objectives and earned the company X dollars? Like how do you
Yeah.
navigate that field?
I mean, who said everything has to revolve around that on a resume? Like, where's that preconceived notion coming from? Like, you could still use a star format. You could still do situation, task, action, result, right? Result doesn't necessarily have to be a business result. If you're not working in a business setting, it could be a finding, right? Or a hypothesis. Okay, like because I did this, here's the result that I think might occur, right? You could still frame it that way on a resume, right? And if it's a
Okay.
personal take-home project, right? Like the end business impact, I don't think really matters. You know what matters is the way you think through everything you did, right? From conceptualization of the problem statement to gathering data to cleaning data to all the analysis in between to how your analysis informed your choices for the model that you're going to develop, how you picked models, and did you consider the problems that might occur if you were to deploy this model? How are you going to correct for that, right? It's you can still think about all that stuff and speak to all that stuff, even though it didn't really drive business impact, right?
Mhm.
Like is what I'm saying making sense, right? Like you're just focused on the real world business impact. Well, what about all the thought process that had to go through it? And if you can explain that and talk about that clearly in a interview, people are gonna be like, oh, okay, well, shit, this kid knows what he's talking about. Cool, right? Because you can put business result on your resume and then come to a fucking interview and the dude's gonna be like, and not know what the fuck you're talking about. And the dude's gonna be like, holy shit, man, this guy's a joke. He's just making shit up and putting it on his resume, right? Like, who do you want to be, right? Like, I'd rather pick the guy who, when I press him and talk to him about these type of questions in an interview, he's gonna show me that, yeah, I've thought about this, I've thought about that, and this is what I think might have happened, even though it wasn't really a business impact, right? Because at the end of the day, like, you need to be able to think and communicate and show that you were thinking through this process from start to finish. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, your projects, it sounds like if you were in an interview, you'd crush it because you thought really deeply about the problem space you're working with and potential impact that could have. Even though it didn't really go out to the real world, you still thought about what could happen if this thing was actually out there in the real world, which is important.